In this video, we're going to write out a couple of code examples to understand how type annotations work specifically with variables. Remember, a type annotation is going to be a little bit of code that we write to help TypeScript along. The type annotation system is kind of at odds with type inference. So we're going to first focus on type annotations and then come along and understand how type inference comes into play. All right, so I'm going to change on over to my editor. And inside my project directory, I'm going to make a new folder called Annotations. We're going to eventually create separate files inside this directory that are all related to type annotations, so we're going to organize them all inside of here. Inside this folder, I'm going to make a new file called variables.ts. And then inside this file, I'm going to write out my first variable declaration that has a type annotation. So I'm going to write out const apples is going to be a number. I'm going to set that to 5 like so. So the colon and the word number right after it is our type annotation. You're going to see syntax that looks exactly like this in the vast majority of TypeScript code that you work with. This type annotation is trying to tell TypeScript that we are only ever going to assign a value of type number to the variable of apples. If I ever try to assign some other type of value besides a number, I'll very quickly see an error message. So for example, if I update the 5 right here to true, which is a Boolean, I'll see an error right away. And it tells me that the type of true is not assignable to a type of number. Now this is also going to work if I try to update the value assigned to that variable as well. So if I update the const keyword to let, which will allow me to reassign apples, I can then reassign apples down here a value of 10 without any issue. However, if I try to assign it some other type of value, like a string, once again, I'll very quickly see an error. And once again, I see a message that says, essentially, you have a string and you're trying to assign it to a variable that's supposed to be a number. Now for the rest of this file, I want to show you some reassignments all over the place, so I'm going to continue using the let keyword. Even though in just about all the declarations we're going to add here, usually I would be making use of the const keyword instead. Type annotations like this right here can be used with any type of value. Remember, we just spoke about some of the different types of values inside of TypeScript. So we've got numbers, strings, booleans, null, void, null, undefined, and functions, arrays, and so on. So with every one of these different types of values, we can use a type annotation. Let's write out a couple of examples just to understand how type annotation works with each of these different types. All right, so in every case, we'll write out let, and then a variable name. In this case, I'm going to call my variable speed, then a colon, then the type of value. In this case, I'm going to say it's going to be a string, and I'm going to assign it a value of fast, like so. Once again, if I try to assign this a value that is not a string, so in this case maybe a number, I'll see an error. And that's pretty much it. We're going to see that same pattern repeating every time we try to assign it a different type of value. Let's take a look at a Boolean as well. So let's say maybe let has name is going to be a Boolean of true. How about null? I'll make a variable called nothing much. And I'll make that null, and that's going to be assigned a value of null. Now this is kind of interesting right here. It's our first example of where we have a value that has a name identical to its type. We're actually going to see that a couple times in TypeScript, and it's something that's a little bit difficult to grasp once you start getting into some more complicated topics. So we're going to have several lectures later on to understand when we're working with something that's a value and when we're working with something that is a type. We could also try a new variable called something like, say, nothing, and make it undefined, like so. Now we can also use type annotation with every other type of value as well, like we just said. So I can use this with an instance of a class, or with a built-in object, or just about anything you can imagine. So let's say that we're working with maybe a date object. I'll put a little section header here, and I'll say built-in objects. So I can make a new variable called now. I'll say that's going to be of type date, and then I'll make a new date and assign it on the other side. So in this case, we're once again doing the same thing we're doing up here. We're saying that we're going to have a variable called now, and we can only assign it a value of type date. And then on the other side, we're going to assign it an instance of a date object. All right, so now that we're kind of getting the idea here, let's take a quick pause. When we come back in the next section, we'll take a look at some of the more complicated syntax that comes up when we start working with objects, arrays, and functions. So quick pause, and I'll see you in just a minute.